What's up, film world? Welcome back to episode 15 of The Dark Room, where two blind cinephiles illuminate the sighted. I'm Lee Pugsley.
I'm Alex Howard.
And this is a podcast for film lovers of all abilities.
Yeah, and today we are doing a Christopher Nolan filmography breakdown, which will be really fun. And we also have our friend John Stark with us, who is a blind movie critic and has his own YouTube channel. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Love to talk about Christopher Nolan.
We figured, Christopher Nolan is one of the only directors that can sell a movie just based on directed by Christopher Nolan. It was really great to have not only Lee and I, but to have you come in as a blind movie critic so we can get the full, film perspective.
Absolutely.
We are actually recording this video for YouTube. So this time we're going to be describing ourselves for blind audiences who are watching on YouTube. So I am a white male wearing glasses and a Sundance shirt currently.
And I am an Asian male with black hair, and I am wearing a white pattern button-up shirt.
And I am a white male, and I have a pretty rockin' beard and a lip ring, which some people mistake as being food on my lip in my YouTube videos, where you can catch me at Mac the Movie Guy. And I'm also wearing a Captain America t-shirt, so has nothing to do with Christopher Nolan, but I'm wearing it. So
that's awesome. We love nerdy t-shirts. And John, do you want to give us just a brief summary about you?
Yeah, I actually have a degree in cinema studies from the University of Central Florida. So this is what I went to school for. And I have been reviewing films for a while. I was reviewing films before I lost my vision. One of many people ever since blogs came around that allowed everybody to become a movie critic. So it became really hard to break through and get into a critics guild. And I stopped for a while because I didn't know how to review films as a blind person. And then audio description came around and I realized how few titles really truly have audio description, and the fact that it doesn't even travel sometimes annoyed me. So I decided to get my voice back out there and use everything that I've accumulated over my life, devoting to watching movies and studying them, to talk about audio description, because it's the thing that I don't think a lot of people want to talk about, but we need its accessibility, and Chris Nolan films specifically are craving audio description. Definitely. So follow me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, I guess Threads. Yeah, my website is macthemovieguy.com. All of the other ones are at Mac the Movie Guy. Any follows that I get just helps me reach a larger audience to talk about audio description.
Yeah, and it's great because I think we all have the same goal of, normalizing audio description and blind movie going and trying to get audio description in the same breath as captions. Really quick, if this is your first time here, audio description is a secondary audio track on movies and TV that describes the action on screen to help blind and low vision viewers enjoy movies better. So that is our whole thing. That is John's whole thing, to advocate for that. And Nolan movies are required viewing with audio description because he likes to play with time and all of that stuff, as we will get into.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all 12 of Christopher Nolan's film in chronological order based on the year they came out. We'll kind of share our thoughts on what we think of the movie and any insights we might have, and then we'll let you know in our ranking where it sits, like which number it lands at. So the first film is The Following, which was released in 1998. I'll be honest, I have not seen this movie, so I don't really have anything to comment on it. But for you, Alex and John, who have seen the movie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Another thing we'll be doing is we'll be saying where you can stream the movie with audio description for each movie. And Following, since it is his first movie and it is 1998, this is one of the ones that does not have audio description at all. So I have not seen this movie in about 10 years. I honestly don't remember much about it, but I think that also might go to, not that it's a bad movie. It's not one of the more memorable ones, I think, because I watched The Prestige the same summer as this one, and I remember that one a lot better. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say on it. I think it was, his first movie. Usually it's a little low budget, a little indie, but I mean, it's still Nolan. So, I mean, from what I remember, he doesn't have any bad movies. So I have this one in my number 11 spot. Considering I don't remember much, I didn't think it was fair to rank it much higher than that.
Following for me was the second Nolan film that I watched. I guess I'm a little bit older. I got a little bit of gray in my beard. So I saw Following after I saw Memento, and so I didn't get to see it theatrically. I doubt many people really did, except for film critics. So I don't know how many people have had that experience. It's a little over an hour long. It's actually pretty short, and to me, it always felt like it was a proof of concept film. It kind of came out around the same time as Darren Aronofsky's Pi. And that to me felt more like Darren was saying, you know, like he had made more of a complete film. And then he went into Requiem for a Dream, which came out also around the same time as Memento, about the same year. So they kind of actually have the same trajectory. To me, Following is less of a film that I think people would want to rewatch or want to revisit. It just feels like something that you check off on your checklist. It got him the money to fund Memento, so it worked. But Following is my number 12. It just really doesn't do much for me.
And for my ranking, because I have not seen this movie, I don't feel like it would be fair for me to rank it at all. But I guess it would be at number 12, but I'll just leave it off my ranking list for now.
Okay, great. So then his next movie in chronological order was Memento in 2000. This movie also does not have audio description anywhere right now for at least the US. It's not listed on Audio Description Project, which if you don't know what that is and you're new, it's with the ACB and it lists every title that is available streaming or physical or in theaters and where you can find the audio description track. So it's not on there currently. I do think it's important that it gets it eventually because I remember watching this in film school and it was great. I mean, it's told backwards, but it's also an iconic Nolan film. This is where he really comes out and shows like how he's different and how he manipulates time. And it is a film school movie. Because of all the time manipulation, it is very important that this gets audio description at some point. But I do remember really liking this movie a lot when I saw it. And it's one of those that like really shows why he's different and why he stands out from the pack. So for me, Memento is number 6 out of 12.
Yeah, I got to see Memento in theaters in its original theatrical release, and for me, it kind of felt like it really does feel like it was like one of the defining moments of validation in the fact that, yes, I'm meant to be doing cinema studies. I just happened to be in a major city that was playing Memento. I used to live in a smaller town that never would have picked up Memento. And I was visiting family. We went to the theaters and they're like, what do you want to see? I was like, that. I've heard great things. Let me see that. That's never coming to my town. And it blew me away and it just floored me. The storytelling and everything. And I've kind of been obsessed with Memento ever since then. And it's a film quite frequently where somebody has asked me, so what's your favorite film of all time? I've definitely said Memento before. So it's definitely been up there for me. Even though I always struggle with what actually is my favorite film. I think I have like 20 of them, but it's up there for me. He just does such a beautiful job directing this script, which he also wrote, which is based on a short story from his brother, Jonathan Nolan, which interestingly enough has been remade by Bollywood, a 3-hour Bollywood film, by the way. Yeah, and I had an opportunity to listen to the director's commentary track while we were preparing for this, and to listen to Chris Nolan just talk about the ideas that he had when he was filming this. He thinks about everything. He thinks about like where to put the camera in the room to kind of make you feel like a certain way, like which. It's not as simple as just showing you the hotel room. It's like which corner of the hotel room does he want to show it to you from? He really thinks about like every little detail. And I think it's a brilliant film. It's the kind of film that I feel like one day Amazon is going to throw some TTS, text to speech audio description on, and it'll just be in their catalog of ever expanding titles. I hope it gets real audio description one day. It's in this weird place where if somebody who's congenitally blind came up to me and said, "Hey, I want to be a film major, what films should I see?" And I had to make like a list of films, Memento would be on there, audio description or no audio description. I think it answers the question of why Chris Nolan exists. I think if he hadn't made Memento, we wouldn't have Chris Nolan. So it's definitely the defining moment for launching his career. Because of that, it's my number 2 film.
For anyone who is low vision or blind, this would be a pretty difficult film to watch for the first time, no?
I absolutely agree. And you may have to watch it. The thing about some of Nolan's films, though, are that they're actually more rewarding the second time around because of how the story is written. So Memento is a film that should be watched twice anyway by anybody. I know that we have some sighted users that use this. If you've never seen Memento, I would still recommend to you try to watch it twice, because I think you'll uncover all of the different layers that Nolan really puts into the film on the second time around. But as far as just certain sort of milestone films and over the course of cinema, I think Memento has kind of become that film. And that's why I wish so badly it would have audio description. It's hard for me to leave that off. It's like going through film school, there were certain films that I felt like were shown and had to be shown. Like when you're talking about Hitchcock, obviously you get shown Psycho. Memento is sort of like Psycho for Nolan. It doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite, but it answers a lot of questions as to why this director is so popular, and why they were able to make so many other films. And then you can debate later on about whether or not it's your favorite. But I would definitely put it up there with everything from Citizen Kane all the way through to E.T. and some of those other films that just sort of answer the question as to why somebody exists as a director.
I pretty much agree with all of your thoughts, John. I think that Memento is absolutely brilliant. I think it should be required viewing for any film lover, and specifically for any film class. I think that it is one of those milestone films that stands out in the whole canon of the history of film in general, because it was just such an innovative concept, the way that he told the story, the way that he played with time moving backwards. And it was something that we had never seen before up to that point. And every scene leaves you on a cliffhanger. You get a little bit more information as you go through it. You get a few more clues, but you're still kind of wondering until the last 5 to 10 minutes what's actually happening. But what I love about that too is it kind of puts you in the mind of the main character, who's also just kind of confused and wondering what's going on and trying to make sense of all of these pieces. And I'm glad you mentioned the director's commentary, because I also watched the director's commentary for Memento, and it's really a masterclass in directing to listen to or watch that commentary. So for anyone interested in the craft of filmmaking, highly recommend the Memento commentary if you're able to get your hands on it. It's absolutely fascinating, and you just learn a lot about what makes a really good and creative story. And yeah, it really did put Nolan on the map in such a big way. I really love Memento, and that's why it's number 3 on my Christopher Nolan ranking list.
Wow, for both of you, it's pretty high. I mean, I haven't watched this in probably 7 or so years, maybe 10 years, but that makes me want to revisit it, because I mean, it's number 6 for me, but that's awesome that it's in both of your guys' top 3.
Yeah, I've seen it so many times. That's, I guess, the curse of the fact that I've been sighted and I've been blind. I mean, I've seen Memento at least 15 times. So for me, it's so hard to I mean, I remember I went through it and ended up watching it with director's commentary and switching kind of in and out just to kind of make sure I knew where I was, because the director's commentary is not balanced very well, so you can't really hear the film at all. But everything just came back to me. I remembered shots and what scenes looked like and everything, just from having absorbed this. I was obsessed with this film for a long time. So yeah, the fact that it's my number 2 and not my number 1 mean, something came along down the way that blew my mind even more. So
Yeah.
I also watched Memento when my vision was better, so I was able to take in more of the visuals. And then anytime that I've rewatched it, my vision was in a better place than it is now. I haven't actually watched it in my current state of vision, and I know the movie, so I think I could still absorb it, but there would be certain challenges to really get the fullness of it without audio description. So as you guys have all said, hopefully they'll make an actual audio description track for it. Sooner rather than later would be preferable.
Yeah, I think that's been my hesitation is with my current state of vision, I don't know how much I would enjoy it because I've only seen it maybe twice. And it was a while ago. So I think I would be confused without audio description, but hopefully it gets it someday. Lee, what is our next one in chronological order?
In chronological order, our next movie is Insomnia with Al Pacino and Robin Williams, which came out in 2002. Yeah, what do you guys think of this movie?
I think an article just came out last week. I believe it was Steven Soderbergh said that Warner Brothers executives didn't like Memento and he had to convince them to let Nolan do Insomnia. So this is Nolan's first studio movie. I believe it was Steven Soderbergh. I just watched Insomnia for the first time a couple weeks ago. I rented it on Amazon Prime because that's where it has audio description. I was very, very impressed. When I saw it had Robin Williams and Al Pacino, I was like, wait, Robin Williams in a drama role? I need to see this. It was really good. I think weirdly it's the most not Nolan of the Nolan movies, but I love the setting of, there's 30 Days of Night where in Alaska where it's all nighttime for a month. And then in this one, it's all daytime, all the time. And I think that really makes a great setting. Like Al Pacino's struggling to sleep, obviously, it's called Insomnia, but you see him kind of going crazy and doubting himself and doubting what's real and what's not. And it becomes really, really intense towards the end. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. This is number 7 for me, just under Memento. I think the first 6 or 7 movies on my list are ones that I absolutely love. And then the bottom ones are ones that I like. But Insomnia is definitely one of the, I would say, better Nolan movies to me, at least in the top half. I enjoyed it a lot.
For me, it's been a while since I've seen Insomnia. I've seen it a couple times. The thing that I always take away from it is just how great Robin Williams was in that film and how he really deserved an Oscar nomination and didn't get one. It's a really good thriller. It also feels, I think one of the reasons why I have it a little bit lower is it doesn't even feel like Nolan anymore. It feels like Nolan trying to make a studio happy and also likely having lots of feedback because he's such a new director. And you're right, this is his first studio film. And it's also a remake. So he doesn't have the benefit of coming off of an original concept like so many of his things are, or working off of his brother's screenplay or anything like that. This was a movie that originally starred Stellan Skarsgård, and then they remade it with Al Pacino in Stellan's role. So yeah, I remember the visuals, and he played a lot with that sort of insanity of being in the light too much and not being able to sleep. And it did play a little bit stylistically, but I also think that he played it a little safe because he wanted to direct more things. So it feels like safe Nolan. And even though he got great performances, I mean, it's hard not to get great performances out of 3 Academy Award winning actors. I mean, he has Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and Hilary Swank. I don't know how you mess that up. This was a pretty softball pitch for him. It's my number 10.
I think Safe Nolan is a really good way to describe Insomnia. I think that this movie is one that sometimes goes a little under the radar and people tend to sleep on it, no pun intended. It's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but I do think that it's a very solid mystery thriller. And I think what really makes this movie work for me is the performances, as you mentioned, from Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and Hilary Swank. I think that all 3 of them would have been worthy of getting Oscar nominations had the Academy chosen to do that. And I think it's a really interesting character study too. Like the whole cat and mouse game that they play is really fascinating. Kind of seeing where Al Pacino's character goes is really interesting. And I don't know, I'm a really big fan of movies that give us interesting character studies to dive into the mind of a character to see what motivates them and how those motivations affect their behavior. And I think that Insomnia does that really well. And that's why, for me, I put this at number 7 on my Nolan list.
I think another great thing about it is basically he's trying to figure out if he committed this crime on purpose or not. And I think as an audience, like, we don't know either. And so I really like that we're trying to figure him out. I think as he's trying to soul search himself to see, we're on the journey with him. So I really love that.
Next up, we have Batman Begins, which came out in 2005 and started the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah, so I think I was reading, this was kind of a risk for DC, obviously. I mean, Christopher Nolan wasn't a huge name yet, and they were going a much darker route to Batman than they were with Michael Keaton and all of that. So it was a pretty big risk for them. I liked this movie. This is number 8 for me, just below Insomnia. A lot of people, I feel like this movie has grown in popularity a lot since the trilogy ended, and some people like Batman Begins better than The Dark Knight. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's a great start to the Batman story. I think the style of Nolan really pairs well with Batman, with the dark and brooding, and they went that route instead of the campy. And currently you can stream Batman Begins with audio description on iTunes, Amazon Prime, and HBO Max. So if you have the subscription, I think it's free on Max, which is great. I do like it. I don't love it, but like I said, I mean, it changed the way people view Batman from here on out.
It also changed the superhero genre in some ways, or at least it changed the way that superheroes can be depicted. What I really enjoyed about this movie is the way that it brought a lot of humanity and rawness to superhero characters that had previously just been portrayed as very like campy and somewhat over the top, but making these characters in Batman Begins very human was a really smart choice. And I think that it really affected the trajectory of superhero movies and what could be done in the superhero universe moving forward. I also think that the score is really solid, and yeah, just really appreciate this movie. I put it at number 6 on my list.
Yeah, I think we started talking about something that we're going to be talking about a lot coming after these couple of films here, and that's score. Absolutely, this is when you get to see a little bit more of Nolan, like true. Give me your money and let me make a film, Nolan. However, I still think there was a lot of studio interference here. There's a lot happening in Batman Begins. There's the part of me that feels bad. I even because I watched as many of these as I could. So when I did a review of myself of Batman Begins, I pointed out that I felt so bad like talking about it in a certain way, because I know that me in 2005, before I knew what was ahead for me, I was in love with this. Like I was so excited, but I had no idea what Nolan was going to do with the Batman franchise moving forward. And now that I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, it set things up nicely so that other things could succeed later on. But when I come back to it, it's got a lot of villains in it for your first film. I mean, people complain about like Spider-Man 3 having too many villains. He's got to fight like Ra's al Ghul and whatever we want to call Liam Neeson's character to not spoil. We'll call him Ducard for purposes of this. And Scarecrow, and he's also got Falcone. Tom Wilkinson is fantastic in this film. So there's a lot of villainy going on in this, and there's also the corrupt cops that they're suggesting in here. There's just a lot. There's actually a really reduced amount of screen time comparatively for both Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman to what they get kind of later on in the franchise. And I didn't mind Katie Holmes. I think people think that this is like, oh, well, it's because of Katie Holmes. I didn't really mind her. I mean, it's just that her and Maggie are just two completely different versions of Rachel. I feel like Katie Holmes is Rachel when she's still optimistic, and Maggie played her like after she's completely broken down and feel like she smokes 2 packs a day or something afterwards and goes out for drinks, and she's like, I hate my job. You know? I mean, it's kind of a nice contrast because there's some optimism still left in her in the first film. But yeah, it's got a great score, and it introduces a lot of really nice ideas. It has a lot going on to it, and I bet if Chris Nolan was really honest, he'd be like, I got a lot of phone calls from Warner Brothers while making this film, and that would not be what I would call the director's cut, which is why Batman Begins is my number 9 on the list.
I do think the score, you guys are right on with the score. Like, as we started talking about it, I could hear the score in my head. Like, it is so great.
And I agree that Katie Holmes, I didn't mind her either. I thought she was fine, and she did what she needed to do with the character of Rachel in that movie. So I had no issue. Moving forward, then, we get to 2006, which is The Prestige, starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale.
So I just actually rewatched this movie last night. It's funny. I don't feel like when it comes to endings in movies, I don't feel like I'm really good at remembering a lot, which is great for me because the twist threw me off again on the second view. I was like, I don't remember what the twist is. Like, I'm trying, and I was like, I really don't. And then it happened. I was like, it got me the same way. I think the ending of this movie is amazing. I think it makes the whole movie a piece of art. I mean, it is a magic trick, like they call it, The Prestige is the third act of a magic trick, but like the whole movie is a magic trick. This is a masterpiece by Christopher Nolan. This is where Christopher Nolan really came into his own and like was like, this is what I can do with studio money, and I'm just going to blow everyone's minds. And now from here on out, you can just let me be me and trust me. And I feel like this is the movie that got him there. I think all the performances are great. Hugh Jackman, like you said, Scarlett Johansson pretty early on, Rebecca Hall. This is top tier Nolan for me. So you can watch it with audio description on iTunes and Spectrum Access. I was going to rent it last night and I could buy it for $1 more. So I just bought it. And Spectrum Access, I think John mentioned he had some trouble using it. I'll let John talk about that. But for me, The Prestige is number 3. I think this is one of the best Nolan movies, and I think one of the better movies in history. I think it is in the IMDb top 250, if I'm not mistaken.
A lot of his films are. That would be fun to look up and see how many of his films are in the IMDb top 250.
I would guess about 5 or 6 off the top of my head, but Oppenheimer, we'll see where that ends up. But usually when a movie first comes out, it's ranked higher, and as time goes on, it goes down.
Yeah, I just rewatched this yesterday, and I rewatched it without audio description because I own the damn thing, and I was like, why am I going to buy a second copy? That's what's really frustrating, is that they can't put audio description on physical media that they sell home to people. I have like 1,000 DVDs, and I'm pretty certain like 10% of them have audio description. It's really depressing. But I did want to catch up on this, and I thought, hey, there's a Spectrum Access app, but it says it has The Prestige. I couldn't get the download to go past 33%, so I just watched the DVD without it. I've seen The Prestige enough times. It's not a film I would recommend without audio description. I don't think you get anything out of it. What's interesting is the whole film is a magic trick, and that's the brilliance of it. Is this is a film, like I said with Memento, I would say make sure to watch this twice. Like, I am surprised that was just your second viewing, because this is a film where you kind of like, it hits you at the end and you're like, wait a minute, what? And you want to go back and watch it again because you want to see how he pulled it off. I mean, it kind of shows you a little bit, but you still like want to go back through it. And after you've seen it a couple times, kind of watching the little moments, everything is right in front of you. He's not hiding anything. And yet it blows my mind. I think, when you were saying people sleep on Insomnia, I think people sleep on The Prestige.
Oh, definitely.
I think sometimes this is the film that people forget Nolan directed. And
Agreed.
Yeah, this is really high for me. This is number 4. I love The Prestige.
Funny enough, The Prestige is also number 4 for me. And what I really appreciate about this movie from a storytelling point of view is just the framing of it, like you guys have mentioned, like a magic trick, and how it's the three acts of the magic trick. And that's kind of how he frames the whole story. And then, with the twist at the end, that does take a few watches to really get everything and to see how it all comes together. And then once you see it a few times, you're like you were saying, John, it's like, oh, that's so obvious. How could I not get that before? But I think that's the brilliance of Nolan, is that so many times when you rewatch his films, you get something new out of it. I also find it really interesting that both of the main characters are not really likable people at all, but at the same time, you want to watch them. You want to see where their journeys take them. And I think a good storyteller and a good director combined with good actors really makes that journey worthwhile. I mean, there have been movies that I've watched where the characters aren't likable and I don't want to watch their journeys and I don't care about them and I just want them to disappear. But in this movie, it's very much the opposite, where I don't like them, but I still want to watch them and I could watch them for hours.
Yeah, and I think it is very telling, like John was saying. I mean, he doesn't hold back on giving you clues. Like, it's the misdirection. It is a magic trick. You don't put the pieces together till the very end. But then if you go back, like I watched a breakdown video after I finished it, I was like, yeah, everything was there. Like it's all laid out for you right in the beginning. It's insane. And I do think, I mean, people, you think of a twist in a movie, you automatically think of Sixth Sense. I think this movie rivals The Sixth Sense. I think this one is just as good as that.
It has a very similar vibe for sure, because I used to be obsessed with The Sixth Sense and I used to watch that over and over and over again for just picking up on all of the clues. And I had a very similar experience with The Prestige, that I just wanted to watch it over and over and over. Yeah, there are definitely Sixth Sense nods to the way that those clues are revealed.
I will say too, the audio description is not amazing on iTunes. I mean, it's fine, but you can definitely tell it's dated. They described a woman as smart, and I was like, wait, you can't, that's an objective word. You can't say she's smart because you can't look at her and say she's smart. So there are some vocab words. They described an Asian man in a not very nice way, but I know it's a dated AD track, but it's there. So thank God for that.
And now we come to The Dark Knight in 2008.
So The Dark Knight has audio description on the DVD. I think it's on the 4K as well. Prime, iTunes, and HBO Max, which I guess is now Max. So this is my number one to preface this. I was talking to my friend Carlos this week about our favorite Nolan movies. He said the perfect quote for this. I think if you're of a certain age, this movie is our generation's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think this is where I went to the movie and I was like, this is what a movie can be. Like, I will always remember where I was, who I saw this with. I know Spencer listens to the podcast. So, but The Dark Knight is my favorite superhero movie of all time. It is my favorite Nolan movie. It will always be top tier. The interrogation scene with Batman and Joker, after having worked at DC in the mailroom and after I read The Killing Joke, this is the epitome of Batman and Joker, the interrogation scene. And Heath Ledger's performance just elevates this movie to another level. You never get bored. I remember I went to see it in theaters, but then I also went to the 10th anniversary in IMAX, and it was like watching it for the first time. This is an amazing movie, and I think it really raised the bar and showed people what superhero movies can be. Like, they're not just big blockbusters. You can not only be nominated for Oscars, you can win Oscars. It can be a piece of art as well as a piece of popcorn entertainment. So this is top tier. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like Dark Knight changed the game in so many ways, not just as a film, and this is also the last year we had 5 Oscar nominees because the Academy couldn't be trusted to nominate what was the most obvious pick for Best Picture nomination that year. Even if it didn't win, how did it not get nominated? So it was like immediately when this film was nominated for Best Picture, they came in and they were like, all right, well, obviously we have to do something about this. Yeah. And ever since then, we've had more than 5 nominees. 2009 was the first year where the 2009 films had more than 5 nominees.
No, but you're right. The Oscars thing, like, yeah, that was the last year with 5 nominees because people were like, how did Dark Knight not get a Best Picture nomination?
It's Chris Nolan's only acting nomination. That's what's really important, because a lot of people were predicting Oppenheimer, and he's only ever gotten one actor to an Oscar nomination, and it was also the posthumous win for Heath Ledger. And none of his other films have ever gotten an acting nomination. It's amazing how, when we look back on things, it feels a little bit like Shawshank Redemption, where Shawshank didn't light the fire at the Oscars, and it was up against like Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction. But nowadays, if you ask people about Shawshank Redemption, it's like way up people's list, and for some people, it's about Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction. Maybe less so Pulp Fiction, depending on how big of a Tarantino fan you are. But for some people, Shawshank would be up above there. But Dark Knight has surpassed whatever else came out that year. I mean, for a lot of people, it's just the film that stood the test of time.
I think it was also the first acting nomination for a superhero movie too.
That's probably true. I can't imagine how it wouldn't be, because I can't think of a single movie that would have gotten one before that. But it obviously was posthumous because of Heath Ledger. That had a lot to do with it, which is a shame, because I think if I could have gotten one more nomination for this film, I would have given one to Aaron Eckhart, because I think he was excellent as Harvey Dent. And it's amazing to see the two of them in that film. Heath Ledger takes up so much oxygen that it's almost like we forget to talk about how terrific Aaron Eckhart was in this film. But I think this is Aaron Eckhart's best performance of his career, across the board, in any film that he's ever done was his role as Harvey Dent. So I love this film. It's my number one. It's actually easily like in my top 5 of all time. I think currently it's in my letterbox. When you get to pick 4 films, I think The Dark Knight is one of them for me. So the score is incredible.
So good.
Everything about this film. I love everything about this film. I've seen it a ridiculous amount of times. I watch it with audio description, without audio description. I'll watch 10 minutes of it. I'll watch it back to back. I'll watch it in any form possible. I'll just marathon the thing for 24 hours. It doesn't matter. I'm in love with this film.
Was The Dark Knight also the film that Christopher Nolan started shooting in IMAX from here on out? Because I know that it was specifically shot for IMAX, correct?
Not the whole thing. They're sequences.
Sequences, correct.
I think it's sequences, yeah.
And then I feel like after that, though, then he started shooting more and more for IMAX specifically. But up until that point, I don't remember him shooting other movies with IMAX format.
He's also one of the few directors that still shoots on film and still promotes, and actually has, he and Tarantino are still pushing actual film releases of their works, which is really interesting, that whenever he can, he still pushes out the 80 millimeter release of his film. So he very much prefers that. And he also is somebody who very much uses practical effects as much as humanly possible. Like, he wants to make sure the Batmobile actually drives, it's not just a set piece. Yeah, there's a lot of things that Chris Nolan does. And this is finally where I felt like the studio was like, hey, you know what? You do you. You do you. Just whatever. We're not going to interfere.
And I think Heath Ledger, I mean, having not seen There Will Be Blood, because I hear great things about Daniel Day-Lewis, but I mean, this is my favorite performance of all time for Heath Ledger.
It's one of the best performances ever to hit any screen anywhere. And not just for that reason, but for all the other reasons you guys mentioned, The Dark Knight is also my number one very easily. I mean, it's just a masterpiece in so many ways, from the acting to the score to the cinematography to the storytelling to, some really great monologues. Everything about it, it just works and hits so well. It hits all the beats it needs to. And I agree, John, that Aaron Eckhart is incredible in this movie, and people don't talk about him because Heath Ledger was so incredible as well. But yeah, I definitely give Aaron Eckhart his due, and I think if he would have been nominated for an Oscar as well, that would have been very deserved. So yeah, that's what I got. I don't really have anything more to add than everything that you guys gave in terms
I
of
love that we
the
all have the same number one though. Like,
I'm actually surprised
that's
about
pretty,
that.
that's pretty cool that we all agreed that The Dark Knight was number one. I thought somebody was going to try to throw in a curveball, but no, we all, great minds think alike.
Would you guys agree that it was, I mean, I know it's not that old of a movie, but I think the comparison to Raiders that my friend made is really accurate with people in our age group.
I think I'm in a different age group, but yeah, I mean, I can see that for your age group. Mine would be Jurassic Park. So Jurassic Park kind of felt like it was that moment for me.
I think I do see where you're coming from, Alex, and I would agree that, yeah, it would definitely be the equivalent of Raiders of the Lost Ark for, for certain generations, absolutely. Because it's so iconic, and it is one of those things where, like you were saying, you remember where you were when you watched it, you remember how you felt afterwards, the excitement, the rewatchability, all of that definitely tracks and definitely resonates.
Yeah, I think the next generation after us has already had theirs, and that was with Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. That 1-2 punch combo there of that mega film, The Great Snap. I think there are a lot of people who were affected by that culmination of everything that all those Marvel films have been building up. For the people who grew up with all the Marvel films once it started, actually 2008 was the first, was Iron Man. So it started the same year as Dark Knight and then moved forward.
Yeah, and
So,
I think, I mean, Iron Man was popular, but I think Dark Knight also helped propel the superhero genre to the popularity it's in now, and the MCU even to where it is now. I mean, I know Dark Knight's DC, but I think the popularity of those two coming at the same summer really elevated the genre to what we're seeing now.
Oh, absolutely. And DC has been chasing this success and they have yet to ever attain it. If I'm sure if they could have paid Chris Nolan to take over DC instead of having to go to Zack Snyder, if he had been willing to direct every film after that, they would have done that. But unfortunately, he likes to do innovative and challenging projects and doesn't want to just direct superhero films.
And so this is a good stopping point for today's episode. We will resume next week with part 2 of our Christopher Nolan tier rankings. John, it was so good to have you on the show for this episode, and it's been fun diving into Nolan with you, and we look forward to doing it again next episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. And of course, I hope to continue this conversation. Hopefully you guys will have me back for part 2. That'd be weird if I didn't come back.
We couldn't do it without you.
Do you want to tell the people where they can find you for this one?
Yeah, you can find me. My website is backthemovieguy.com. You can find me on YouTube at Back the Movie Guy, and also it's the same handle for Instagram, Threads, and Twitter. I'm gonna still call it Twitter until the X thing settles for a little while. I don't want to get caught up in that, like when Netflix tried to call themselves like Flickster or whatever that was for a little while, and they gave up. I want to make sure it's X, solidly before I switch to X. So it's still Twitter right now. And please give me a follow there. The more visibility I have, the more people hear me talk about audio description, the better it is for my community.
No pun intended.
Yes.
No, yeah, we are honestly like 3 blind movie critics. I feel like that's rare in itself. I'm sure there's more than 3, but we are trying to all band together to make audio description much more common, trying to get open audio description screenings. That would be great. You can follow us on Instagram at Darkroom Filmcast, and please email us with your Christopher Nolan ranking. And if you want to be in the audio description discussion group, you can email us as well at darkroomfilmcast@gmail.com.
And a special shout out to Matt Lauterbach and All Senses Go for making transcripts of this episode and our previous episodes possible, just to create more accessibility for all listeners.
Great, and we will see you guys back here for part 2.
Have a wonderful day.
I'll be
Thanks
here.
for listening.